Welcome to UberSchool's deep dive into various types of vulnerabilities. I'm Dana, and I'll be guiding you through this crucial topic for any aspiring cybersecurity professional.
And I'm Pete, joining Dana to explore the complex landscape of security weaknesses that can affect our systems, applications, and networks. Let's get started.
All right, Pete, let's begin with application vulnerabilities. These are weaknesses in software that can be exploited by attackers. First up is memory injection. Can you explain this one to our students?
Certainly, Dana. Memory injection is a nasty vulnerability that allows attackers to insert and execute malicious code in a program's memory space. Imagine someone sneaking into your house and rearranging your furniture while you're asleep. That's memory injection for your computer.
That's a great analogy, Pete. Now let's move on to buffer overflow. This occurs when a program writes more data to a buffer than it can hold. It's like trying to pour a gallon of water into a pint glass. The excess has to go somewhere, and in computer terms, that somewhere can be exploitable by attackers.
Exactly, Dana. And speaking of overflowing, did you hear about that time Marcus Cooper tried to fill his swimming pool with Jell-O? He claimed it was for a science experiment, but ended up with a backyard full of wobbly, lime-flavored goo. Took weeks to clean up.
Oh, Pete, you and your Marcus Cooper stories. Let's focus on the topic at hand. Next up are race conditions. These occur when the behavior of a system depends on the sequence or timing of uncontrollable events. In the security world, this can lead to unexpected behavior or security bypasses.
Right you are, Dina. And closely related to race conditions are time of check, TOC, and time of use, TOU, vulnerabilities. These are race conditions where an attacker can change something between when a program checks a resource and when it uses that resource.
Excellent explanation, Pete. Now let's talk about malicious updates. These exploit the trust in software update mechanisms to distribute malware or backdoors. It's like a wolf in sheep's clothing, using the very system designed to protect you as a means of attack.
That's a scary thought, Dana. Now let's pause for a moment and test our students' understanding with a question. Which of the following is not an example of an application vulnerability we've discussed?
A. Memory injection. B. Buffer overflow. C. SQL injection. D. Race conditions.
Take a moment to think about it, students. We'll reveal the answer after we discuss a few more topics.
Good idea, Pete. Let's move on to operating system vulnerabilities. These are weaknesses in the core software that manages computer hardware and software resources. One common OS vulnerability is privilege escalation. Can you elaborate on that?
Certainly, Dana. Privilege escalation allows users or processes to gain higher-level permissions than intended. Think of it as a janitor suddenly getting access to the CEO's office. It's a serious breach of security that can lead to unauthorized access to sensitive data or system controls.
Excellent explanation, Pete. Another critical OS vulnerability involves drivers. Driver vulnerabilities are particularly dangerous because drivers often run with high privileges. An exploit here can lead to system-wide compromise. It's like having a weak lock on your front door. Once breached, your entire home is at risk.
That's a great analogy, Dana. Now let's shift gears to web-based vulnerabilities. These are a major concern in our interconnected world. One of the most notorious is SQL injection, or SQLI. Can you explain this one to our students?
Of course, Pete. SQL injection allows attackers to interfere with database queries an application makes. It's like being able to change the questions on a test while you're taking it. This can lead to unauthorized data access, data manipulation, or even complete system takeover.
Excellent explanation, Dana. Another critical web-based vulnerability is cross-site scripting, or XSS. This lets attackers inject malicious scripts into web pages viewed by other users. Imagine if someone could make your computer run any program they wanted just by you visiting a website, that's the danger of XSS.
That's a chilling thought, Pete. Now let's test our students again. Which of the following best describes SQL injection?
A. Inserting malicious code into a program's memory space. B. Interfering with database queries made by an application. C. Gaining higher-level permissions than intended. D. Injecting malicious scripts into web pages viewed by other users.
Take a moment to think about it, students. We'll reveal the answer shortly.
While they're pondering that, Dana, let's move on to hardware vulnerabilities. These are often overlooked but can be just as dangerous as software vulnerabilities.
Absolutely, Pete. One type of hardware vulnerability involves firmware. Firmware vulnerabilities can affect a wide range of devices, from routers to IoT devices. They're particularly problematic because they can be difficult to patch and may provide persistent access for attackers.
That's right, Dana. Another hardware-related issue is end-of-life hardware. This poses a significant risk because it no longer receives security updates. It's like driving a car that can't be repaired anymore. Eventually, it's going to break down, leaving you vulnerable.
Excellent analogy, Pete. Let's not forget about legacy hardware. This may lack modern security features or be incompatible with current security practices. It's akin to trying to fit a square peg in a round hole sometimes. It just won't work with modern security needs.
Now, Dana, let's venture into the realm of virtualization vulnerabilities. These present unique challenges in our increasingly virtualized world.
Indeed, Pete. One of the most concerning virtualization vulnerabilities is VM escape. This allows an attacker to break out of a guest VM and access the host system or other VMs. It's like a prisoner escaping their cell and gaining access to the entire prison.
That's a vivid image, Dana. Another virtualization vulnerability to be aware of is resource reuse. These vulnerabilities can lead to information leakage or unauthorized access between VMs. Proper isolation is crucial here, much like ensuring apartment units in a building are properly separated.
Excellent point, Pete. Now, let's test our students once more. Which of the following is not a type of hardware vulnerability we discussed?
A. Firmware vulnerabilities. B. End-of-life hardware. C. Legacy hardware. D. VM escape.
Take a moment to consider your answers, students. We'll reveal the correct response after discussing a few more topics.
While they're thinking, Dana, let's move on to cloud-specific vulnerabilities. Cloud computing has revolutionized IT, but it also brings its own set of security challenges.
You're absolutely right, Pete. One of the most common cloud vulnerabilities is misconfigurations. These can include overly permissive access controls or exposed storage buckets. It's like leaving your house keys under the doormat, convenient, but dangerous.
Great analogy, Dana. Another critical issue in cloud computing is the shared responsibility model. Problems often arise from misunderstandings about which security aspects are managed by the cloud provider and which are the customer's responsibility. It's crucial to know who's responsible for what, or things might fall through the cracks.
Excellent point, Pete. Now, let's delve into supply chain vulnerabilities. These are becoming increasingly important in our interconnected world. Can you start us off with service provider vulnerabilities?
Certainly, Dana. Service provider vulnerabilities can affect multiple downstream customers. This includes risks from compromised systems, insider threats, or inadequate security practices at the provider level. It's like a domino effect. One vulnerability at the provider can cascade down to all their customers.
That's a great explanation, Pete. Another critical area in the supply chain is hardware provider vulnerabilities. These can introduce backdoors or weaknesses at the manufacturing level. This is particularly challenging to detect and mitigate once hardware is deployed.
Absolutely, Dana. And let's not forget about software provider vulnerabilities. These can compromise the integrity of software before it reaches end users. This can occur through compromised build systems, malicious code injection, or compromised update mechanisms.
Excellent overview, Pete. Now let's test our students again. Which of the following is not a type of supply chain vulnerability we discussed?
A. Service provider vulnerabilities. B. Hardware provider vulnerabilities. C. Software provider vulnerabilities. D. Cloud provider vulnerabilities.
Take a moment to think about it, students. We'll reveal the answer after we cover a few more topics.
While they're pondering, Dana, let's move on to cryptographic vulnerabilities. These can undermine the very foundations of our security systems.
Absolutely, Pete. One major issue in cryptography is the use of weak algorithms. For example, using MD5 for hashing or DES for encryption is considered insecure for most modern applications. It's like using a simple padlock to secure a bank vault. It's just not strong enough.
Great analogy, Dana. Another critical aspect of cryptographic security is key management. Poor key management, such as improper key storage or insufficient key rotation, can compromise the security of otherwise strong cryptographic systems. Even the strongest lock is useless if you leave the key under the doormat.
Excellent point, Pete. Now let's talk about misconfiguration vulnerabilities. These often arise from human error or oversight and can be just as dangerous as more complex vulnerabilities.
You're right, Dana. One common misconfiguration is leaving default settings unchanged. This can expose known vulnerabilities or provide easy access points for attackers. This includes default passwords, open ports, or unnecessary services.
Absolutely, Pete. Another type of misconfiguration involves overly permissive settings. These grant more access or privileges than necessary and can significantly increase the attack surface. This applies to file permissions, network access controls, and user privileges.
Great explanation, Dana. Now, let's shift our focus to mobile device vulnerabilities. These present unique security challenges in our increasingly mobile world.
Indeed, Pete. One significant mobile vulnerability is sideloading. This allows installation of apps from sources other than official app stores and can be a vector for malware distribution if not properly controlled.
Excellent point, Dea. Another mobile device vulnerability involves jailbreaking or rooting. This can bypass built-in security controls, potentially exposing the device to malware or unauthorized access. It's like removing all the locks from your house. You gain freedom, but at what cost?
That's a great analogy, Pete. Now let's test our students once more. Which of the following is not a type of mobile device vulnerability we discussed?
A. Sideloading. B. Jailbreaking. C. Rooting. D. Phishing.
Take a moment to consider your answers, students. We'll reveal the correct response shortly.
While they're thinking, Dana, let's discuss perhaps the most feared vulnerability in the security world, zero-day vulnerabilities.
Ah, yes, Pete. Zero-day vulnerabilities are unknown flaws in software or systems that can be exploited before developers have an opportunity to create a patch. They pose significant risks as there are often no immediate defenses available.
Exactly, Dana. Mitigating zero-day vulnerabilities often relies on defense-in-depth strategies, including robust monitoring, behavioral analysis, and rapid response capabilities to detect and contain potential exploits. It's like having a really good immune system. You might not be able to prevent every infection, but you can respond quickly when one occurs.
That's an excellent analogy, Pete. Now let's review the answers to our previous questions. For the first question about application vulnerabilities, the correct answer is C, SQL injection. While SQL injection is a serious vulnerability, it's primarily a web-based vulnerability, not an application vulnerability in the context we discussed.
For the second question about SQL injection, the correct answer is B, interfering with database queries made by an application. This accurately describes the nature of SQL injection attacks.
For the third question about hardware vulnerabilities, the correct answer is D, VM escape. While VM escape is a serious vulnerability, it's a virtualization vulnerability, not a hardware vulnerability.
And for our final question about mobile device vulnerabilities, the correct answer is D, phishing. While phishing is a significant threat to mobile users, it's not specifically a mobile device vulnerability like sideloading or jailbreaking.
Excellent, Pete. Now let's wrap up with a final question for our students. Which of the following best describes a zero-day vulnerability?
A vulnerability that has been known for exactly 1 day. B, a vulnerability that can only be exploited at midnight. C, an unknown flaw that can be exploited before a patch is available. D, a vulnerability that only affects systems running for 0 days.
Take a moment to think about it, students. The correct answer is C, an unknown flaw that can be exploited before a patch is available. This accurately describes the nature and danger of zero-day vulnerabilities.
Well said, Dana. And there you have it, students, a comprehensive overview of various types of vulnerabilities. Remember, understanding these vulnerabilities is just the first step. As cybersecurity professionals, your job will be to identify, mitigate, and prevent these vulnerabilities from being exploited.
Absolutely, Pete. Stay vigilant, keep learning, and never underestimate the creativity of potential attackers. Until next time, this is Dana and Pete signing off from UberSchool. Keep studying, and we're confident you'll ace that test.